YTs. So, okay, YouTube looks good. It has the wrong title, YouTube, but I'm not sure I can or care to fix that. That's okay. Okay. All right, so we're streaming and on the right spots.
Great.
Yeah, the one thing that's tough, and we'll just chat for a minute while we let everybody get their notifications and show up and do all that stuff. So,
Cool.
yeah, the one thing that's tough is with Twitch and the ads, you you have a choice to either allow them to schedule ads every 30 minutes or so, or users get blasted with a pre-roll before they even get in to see your content. So,
That's what just happened to me as
yeah.
I joined. I was
Yeah.
like, am I in the right spot? Yes. It's
Yeah.
just showing me a
Yeah.
nice little Taco Bell ad or something like that first.
Yeah, so I actually was answering a question last stream, and uh, ads started to come up for for folks. So like I had to stop talking while ads went on. Like okay, and I got in the chat like let me know when ads are over, and then we'll pick up the conversation again. So everybody's like yes, the ads are over. So we were able to start
It
that.
it is fairly handy that it does the ad for everyone at the same time, I
Yeah,
suppose,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
rather than staggering them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We will get started. It is 11:02 by my MacBook's clock, so we'll get the party started here. Thank you to everybody for tuning in today, either live or when you're watching the replay later. I appreciate you coming in. Today we have a good friend that I've spent the past 6 months or so working with. So Heath is joining us from Ackland Avenue, a third-party team that I had the joy of working with for the past 6-ish months, and he has been through the ringer on me with QA automation. So he's going to chime in and say, well, Josh, it actually wasn't that peachy smooth along the way. So Heath, give us like a 15-second. This is who I am and this is what I do. I wish you luck with that impossible mission.
15 seconds, here we go. Heath Nichols, live in Nashville, Tennessee, been in software development and managing teams for several years now. And I love psychology first, thinking, empathy driven thoughts about doing product driven development and helping teams empower themselves and solve problems on their own. Uh,
Nice.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Good deal. All right, so we are talking QA automation today. This is something that I am exceptionally passionate about. And you can and should do this. You can build an automation empire and you can do it without having to fire anybody. And in fact, everybody gets happier when all of this is done. So Heath and I are going to chat for 15, 20 minutes, walk through that, and then we will go into our normal Q&A process where any question is on the table. It can be about QA, it can be about AI, it can be about Nashville. And if it's about Nashville, then Heath is your guy. I've been there once, so I'm not going to be able to add much. All right, so let's continue on. Most importantly, yes, you can. This is one of the biggest challenges where the next slide really kind of hits hard for some folks. Is that it might feel impossible, but this is where most people are stuck. Most of the teams and companies that I've helped, that I've really pushed for, hey, automation is a real thing and it can be done. They get stuck in this trap. They don't have time to automate because they don't automate, and so that cycle just never ends. And it's one of those things that until you get back to this situation where you say to yourself, yes I can, yes we can, you will forever be stuck in this cycle where you just can't get out of it. So unfortunately, no one is here to save you. This is one of these things where you have to take part in your own rescue, and it either starts now or it starts never. It's one of those things that you just keep putting off and off and off. And you keep putting it off because it's difficult and it's scary and it feels like such a big mountain to climb. And I understand that. I've been there. Heath understands that. He's been there. So that's what today is about. Let's at least start talking about it. We'll get into questions and talking about how you can make it a reality and all of those things later. But most important thing is it is a mindset that you have to establish. So Heath and I, just to give you a real world story, we were lucky and we started working on something brand spanking new. So there was zero code laid down, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? And I made the audacious statement of, we are not going to manually test anything. And that's a scary thing for some folks, especially as you're a QA engineer and that's what you've been doing. Like, hey, my value is driven by me testing things. And that's the shift that we're trying to make, is that the value is not in you pushing the buttons, but the value is in you applying your unique brains of how quality folks look at the world and say, I can break that 5,000 different ways that you never thought of. That's what we need. That's what we're trying to extract. That's what we're trying to maximize. And let's let automation and software and tools take care of all of the clicking and everything that goes on to do all of that testing. So Heath, I know that when I threw that crazy idea out of, we're not going to manually test anything, that some people were scratching their heads and saying, uh-oh, that's uncomfortable. So as someone who has lived through the challenge of working with Josh and Josh making these crazy statements in front of the team of like, we're not going to do this thing, how were some of the things that the team brought up that you were able to, because Heath did a really great job of working with the team and saying like, hey, so this is just a different way of thinking about the world, and we can do this and we can make this happen. So I think it's worth talking through some of the real world stuff that people went through when they were like, holy cow, what's happening here?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it was scary. It was me sitting around thinking, what is going to break when we get to production? And wrestling with the shift in perspective and trying to help, like you said, push the team to open their minds to something different, as I also had to open my mind to something different. We at Ackland do have to do things differently in every situation. So that part we're used to. But you pushing, let's say, the quality assurance to the left was a sort of statement that you kind of gave to us to kind of chew on. That was a bit new for us. I mean, we always want to move quality assurance early and often and all the way throughout, but doing it without the manual testing at the end, where like you get the developer to hand it off and say, okay, I'm done with it. That was something that was just like our normal go-to thing. And so it was a great challenge, and it shifted my thinking because I think you'll get into this, so I don't want to,
No, it's okay.
go too far into it, but giving the developers a lot more ownership of that quality assurance piece of the manual testing at the end, all the way through the beginning as well, and giving the quality assurance focused team members different types of tasks really was an expansion of my thoughts. And I was skeptical, Josh, at the beginning. You know that. We had lots of like really maybe borderline intense conversations towards the beginning and a little bit in the middle. But by the end, I'm like, I'm a believer, like this is working. And it was really great to see the team, the developers, hone a new skill, let's say, of fully testing and pushing themselves to think, how would someone else break this? How do I put myself in the mindset of a quality assurance tester?
Yep. Okay, so let's get into some of the realities of making this a thing, other than Josh making crazy statements in meetings and people like heads exploding. Like, how are we actually going to do that? So we can talk through some of that. Most important thing is it is a mindset shift of, we all own quality, and this is something that a lot of people say but not enough people actually execute on. So what this looks like to us is that we don't shift responsibility to somebody else telling us whether something worked. That is not something that somebody owns or a member of our team owns, that I am free of that responsibility. I can check in my code and be done, and I'll wait for Steve or Sally to tell me like, hey, good job, it worked. No, we are responsible for shipping code that works. That the most important thing is that does not mean, and this is where some people get uncomfortable. It's like, oh, you don't value testers, you don't value QA folks. Like, yes, we do. We just want to shift the priority. So this view of quality assistance being more important than quality assurance, that's a mental shift that I made about a decade ago. I think Atlassian, which, as Bob, who's in the chat, knows, is one of my favorite companies. Whether you like their products or not, I think they've built a great company. This is something that they made a shift to, where we want those quality brains helping us decide what tests we should write, what tests should we have, how can we break it, where should those tests be written, how often should they be run. Let's focus on that versus pushing the the quality team to be focusing on, like, okay, developers made a change, I have to go run 50,000 tests, right? That is, we can automate that, we should do all of that. So that is the mental shift. And this is something that's hard for everybody. It's hard for the QA folks that have kind of owned that gate, like, well, am I devalued now? Is it less important, the work that I do? No, it's more important. To Heath's point, we're just shifting it left, so we're doing it sooner, we're doing it more often, so that we can ship more quickly, which was the real push that I was trying to get to. Is at the end of every sprint, we should be able to ship the code that has made it into our production branch, because all of the tests have run. And as uncomfortable as it might be, we're not going to ask somebody to go in and run a set of regression tests on the tests that have already been run by the computer. We're going to trust that those tests are working. And if those tests aren't working, then the answer is we need to go fix those tests or add more tests or whatever it might end up being. So assistance, what is that? This is the thing that I talked about, is that we have to find a way to maximize that unique testing mindset. We all know that developers are notoriously bad at testing their own code. I am guilty of that, very much so. So this is why I value that testing mindset, where there are folks that I have worked with that I know, that I trust, that I can say, all right, here's what we're building. How can we break that? So the goal that we were working on, we never got quite there yet, but we got close to, as we are writing stories, as we are refining stories for our sprints and the work that we're going to do, that we really have a clear definition of, these are the tests that we should write. So it's not really test-driven development, but we define, these are the tests that should be built to support this feature. And I have worked in teams where we start building in parallel. So our teams had the full suite of capabilities to do all of the things. So we had people writing the automation tests, we had people writing the front end code, and people writing the back end code, and we were all writing at the same time. And as people checked things in, the test turned green and everything happened, and we were good. But a huge part of that is knowing the tests that you should be writing and building up front. Who does it? Doesn't matter. The team owns that responsibility. So this is one of those things where engaging and involving your quality team members early and often is so important, that I know everybody tries to do and isn't always good at, but this requires that. So this really requires that your testers and quality engineers, whatever label that you choose to use for that they are engaged heavily within that process, as you are deciding what work, how it's going to work, and the way you're going to test it. Heath, anything I missed there on some
Didn't
of our
miss
journey?
any. Yeah, I don't think you missed anything in particular, but I did want to mention that in our case, which was a little different than the one you outlined about being able to do them all at the same time. You mentioned that we couldn't quite get to that point with the team
Yeah.
and the preparation plan, the way that we did it. But what it did allow for us to do in our case was sort of give our QA team member a little bit more autonomy. We said, go and find the things that need to be automated. Obviously, we tried to have some of those discussions during refinements and planning. But if we couldn't get there in those refinement sessions, we would say, all right, Mario, go find what needs to be automated, bring it to us, create your own backlog, and get started. And so that anything that isn't covered by unit tests or the automation that already exists, you're going in and you're, again, having that ownership, and which I think is a kind of a nice give and take, right? Like we sort of took away his sort of comfort zone of, I need to manual test. And we said, we're going to give you responsibility instead, of looking through the application, putting your product mindset on what needs to be tested, putting your quality assurance mindset into play in a different way. And I felt like that was honestly a great opportunity for him, um, despite the sort of change that we asked him to undergo.
Yeah, the standard fear of that change, right? Everybody struggles with fear of change, and we understand that. But when you execute this approach well, you are actually empowering and engaging all of your team members more, which is what everybody wants. Everybody wants to have more ownership and more responsibility and be able to feel as if the contributions that they're making are making a bigger difference. And this does that. It's scarier, without a doubt. Certainly accept and understand that. But yeah, that is the goal. Again, we have smart people on our teams. Let's just lean on them for the really hard stuff. Let's not lean on them for the repetitive stuff. We can manage that. We can fix that.
Yep.
So okay, continuing on. 100% coverage is not the goal. It is not the target. Please, 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 if you are watching or listening to this or whatever it might be that you're doing, please don't chase 100% coverage. The diminishing returns on that are way closer than you think. So it is not appropriate to chase that. So anybody that's doing that, please stop. You are writing tests that don't matter, that don't test things that are important. In fact, one of the key things that we did was we talked about in the stack, in the layers of our application, what layers are we going to test and what layers are we not going to test, because we recognize that adding tests for certain layers where it was just like the writing tests for the queries, there was no value in that, but writing tests in the business logic layer and the components that we build and various things like that, those are tests that mattered. Those are the things that we care about. We still didn't drive towards 100% coverage in those sections. So the key thing is that just take it one step at a time. We talked about at the beginning, it can feel impossible. You get stuck in that cycle of I can't automate because we didn't, and so you just get stuck. And so find that one thing. Find that one thing that you can automate today. What is the thing that in your current sprint or in your next sprint, what is the thing that you and your team can sit down and say, you know what, we are never running this test manually again. At least get your test coverage to greater than 0. That is your target, is how do I go from 0 to something? And like anything, getting that first customer, getting that first test is always the hardest. So, but it doesn't happen unless you decide we are making this happen. It's a thing that we're going to do. So tiny steps along the way. This is a long journey. You are going to be climbing a mountain, and that mountain sometimes feels like it's getting bigger and bigger every day, which as your team is building code, that might actually be true. One of the things that we do to celebrate along the way is that we track our code coverage. In fact, if somebody checks in code and our code coverage goes down below the current number that we are at, that push fails. So you can't push the code. You can't put it up in the GitHub repository or whatever service that you're using, because you reduce the coverage in areas that matter. So we are simply asking that you maintain at least, and you can do that by removing code, or as you add code, there are more tests that go along with that. But every once in a while, it's a nice little victory that we get to say, oh, hey, you know what? We are like 4 and 5% above the metric that we were failing builds on. So now let's set that to 6%. So now our code coverage is at 6%. We were failing builds when it was at 2, but look at all the work that we've done. So we are now failing builds when it gets below 6, and then in a couple months or a couple weeks later, you push that number up to 10. And so over time, you start turning that crank, and you can really celebrate as a team the steps that you have taken along this way as you're going up this giant mountain that is out there. So make sure to find the little victories along the way, because it is a tough slog. It is hard. It is not easy. And sometimes writing tests and debugging tests is a real pain in the butt. But it certainly pays off, because all those tests run and you can ship with confidence. And that's all that we're after, is how do we ship this code with confidence with as little manual intervention as possible. I think that's the last content slide before we get to questions. Heath, any things you want to layer in there?
Yeah, I would layer in, when you're talking about tiny steps, I think that's the critical point there. And whenever you're committing lots of code at, from other developers, and there's lots of like potential conflicts, pick a component or a thing that needs to be tested and pick small pieces of it at a time. Try to make those increments very small, even if the final thing that needs to be tested has many tests in it. I would just personally recommend encouraging the person who's doing those automated testing increments to push in small commits, so that there's fewer chances for conflicts or issues around that. That was just one in our particular, when we were working together, that was one thing that we had to sort of start shifting towards as time went on.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, yes, we had some conflicts that people got stuck with, and it was not fun and not enjoyable. And those pull requests got difficult to test and validate and everything that went along with that. So, okay, so that is our spiel. I don't know how you spell spiel, but that's what we just did. We talked about QA for.
You never spell it. See, that's the thing.
Okay, that's fair.
You just don't.
So, yeah, so we did this for 20 minutes. One of these days, these office hours, I'm going to be done talking in 15 minutes, and it's going to be glorious. But now the floor is yours to ask questions about anything and everything. Please do that in Twitch chat or YouTube chat, wherever you may be. I've got both chat windows open so I can see that along the way. So any questions that you may have, drop them. And Heath, this is always that awkward moment where you ask for questions and then you don't get questions. And then the strangest thing I've seen is that historically, whenever I say, okay, we're not getting any questions, stream's over, I'm going to turn off the stream, I'll see you next week. Invariably, someone drops in, oh, wait a minute, I got a question. So scarcity is real.
Josh, I work with software developers and I facilitate meetings a lot. And so
yes, you are right.
The awkward silence is fine. It washes over me like the rain.
That's good. Yes. So let's see, 5 or 6 years ago, holy cow, maybe 7 years ago when I started this, I can remember streaming to no one for months, and that is a weird place to be, but you get good at it. Okay, Mr. Galen in the chat. You guys have no idea how big a moment this is. My good friend Bob Galen, not only in the chat, but he's in freaking Twitch chat. You would have told me Bob would have been in Twitch chat 5 or 6 years ago. I would not have believed you, but here he is. Here's our guy. So Bob's question is creating versus retiring automation. Perhaps call it refactoring. Any guidance around that? Retiring automation. Yeah. So automation is one of those. It's one of those things where it's had an evolution over the years. So I know one of the tools that we used when Heath and I were working together, we adopted Playwright, which is not Selenium, which is how many people have automated some of the UI testing throughout the years. And we said, hey, we're starting from scratch. Let's use the new thing. And so that, again, was another risk that we took, where we are now adopting a technology that is new, that members of Heath's team has never used. I think one of the members on my team had used, but not very much. So we were venturing into a new space, and even the unit testing tools that we were using were different. So we weren't using Jest, and we weren't using Selenium, which was different. But one of the things, just like with your refactoring of your UI code going from Angular version whatever to the next version, or React 19 versus React 18. You have to maintain your reduction of technical debt on your automation tools. And so many places I've been, those are like the last things that people keep up to date, and so they get on very old versions, and it's difficult, and they underspend with that, and then you get painted into a corner. So I don't know if that's exactly the question, Bob, that you were asking about the retiring of the automation slash refactoring, but that is something that I've not seen many people do very well, is maintaining current versions of their testing tools, because unfortunately that's, it's like the shoemaker's children, right? They're the last one to get shoes, and it's a tough spot to be. So Heath, I don't know if you have any experience with old testing tools or versions or anything like that where you've gotten into some sticky situations.
No anecdotes for me on that
Okay,
one.
well, good. Consider yourself lucky. that is that is not a fun place to be, right? You think about the times where somebody's running a very old version of a thing, and so now imagine running a very old version of your testing tool, and now all of your tests don't run anymore because you're on an old version. Oh, yes. So Bob is clarifying. Thank you, Bob. That he's saying that you have to look at it like software, same life cycle investments, without a doubt. Yeah, that is that is exactly the thing that unfortunately doesn't get, you know treated as well as it should, and that's really one of the biggest hurdles. And so one of the things that I've done, and this is something that we adopted when working with Heath's team, is that we had our chapter meetings. So that's something that I borrowed from Spotify, and our chapters. We had a relatively small team, so we didn't have multiple chapters. We had a single chapter meeting, but that was where we defined our architecture and strategy for not just how we build and deploy things, but it was build, deploy, and test. So we always made made sure that the architecture for our testing system was first class citizen, just like all of the other pieces of that product. So don't fall into the trap that Bob is making sure we don't do, where it's that thing that lives over in the corner and we don't update it, we don't keep it up to snuff, or maybe we aren't looking forward about where should we be going versus where we are going. So that is one of the situations I've seen way too many times. So again, protect yourself. Think about your future selves. To me, that's what our chapter meetings were always about. It's about what are our future selves going to be mad at us about if we don't address today.
One thing I think that you did well with the automation is protect yourself in the future, because by adding in those alerts that didn't allow pushes in certain conditions, if any of the automation doesn't work, obviously this is one that most people would think of, but still, then it doesn't go through. And the thing that I'm thinking about is, okay, let's say you have a mature system with 40% automation coverage. Someone from up high in the organization says, I don't like this landing page for login. You need to do this or that. You just do a quick fix, you know, and then it doesn't work for some reason. In reality, that automation test could fail and then you could not even think about it. There could be something that goes wrong if you're incorporating this type of quality assurance plan. So having those kind of checks in the pull request system, really handy way to help your team remember, especially if they're coming in and they've been there for years or something. They may have forgotten what the
Yeah.
coverage is. So those checks are really, make sure you're putting those checks in.
Yeah, so we had multiple levels of checks. So we had a pre-commit hook that as you were trying to commit the code to GitHub, it would run all of the unit tests, and there was no way around that. So if any unit tests were failing, then the system's like, you can't do this. Go fix those tests and come back when you're done. So there was that. Then and we pushed this off until it got pushed into a branch to make sure that the code coverage numbers are staying where they should, because we had multiple people, pushing the branches and things like that. So it wasn't fair to put it on that end. So there are multiple levels of making sure we are protecting our future selves again. All right, Bob, take care of yourself. Thanks for hanging out on the Big Bad Twitch. I will see you Sunday for the podcast. Be ready. Okay. Well, we had one question that we strung out into longer terms. We'll see if we have any more questions. Otherwise, Heath and I are going to return to our lives and enjoy our afternoons on Thursday. What is this, July 17th? So if there are no more questions, we're going to shut it down. Let me let the awkwardness simmer. Just let it
wash
sit.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, for those of you in the chat, either in YouTube or Twitch, any question you may have, we certainly talked about quality assurance today, automation, anything along those routes. Last week we talked about using AI effectively versus just like using AI just because, or if there's anything, like if you're just struggling with something, we are here for you. And if not, that's okay. Maybe everything's working and everything's fine and you don't have any worries. I don't believe that, because the world we live in is challenging. The world of software engineering is not simple. So, okay. Well, Heath, we did it. I thank you for being a part of this.
It was a pleasure.
And helping us out over the past months. And I'm sure we'll come up with something and we'll be chatting again. So, everybody that tuned in, I thank you for tuning in. Everybody that is watching this later, thanks for watching this later. And we will see you next week, same time, same channel, whichever social media channel you're on. All right. See you, everybody.